filled out. When I get a request for an accounting, this is the first thing I look at. I ask for. If they don't have it, I won't even begin. I'm looking for specific things. One, I can tell what is my date I'm going to start my accounting. You will only need the inventory and appraisal sheet when you're starting the first
Oh,
first accounting.
I
And
have it on my phone. Yes.
I'm gonna mute Clarice. So when I'm starting my first accounting, if you're doing a second, a third, a fourth, any after this inventory and appraisal is not helpful to you or will not need to be used. Um, a couple of things I'm looking for immediately is on the inventory and appraisal. If I get it and it's marked partial, that tells me I do not have all my assets I need for my accounting. And if that's the case, I will go back and say I need the final because this tells me I don't have all assets. And even though I'm get an inventory and appraisal from a client, I'm still asking questions like, are there any other assets that weren't on here? Or just to make sure it really is a complete inventory and appraisal before I get started. Now, the second box, which I'm really looking for, is that it's a final. And sometimes I have to be careful that sometimes they're marked final, but they're not the full final because they did a partial first and then a final second. And if they only show me the final, I'm only getting a piece of what may be all of the assets, right? So I still verify that I have all the assets. I'm going to go through a couple things in case you need to make corrections. A lot of times, and I'm talking at least 50% or more of the time, I will get an inventory and appraisal that is inaccurate. I am only an LDA, so I have to be very careful that when a client comes to me and it does not appear accurate, the inventory and appraisal, I have to just state it doesn't appear accurate and I cannot move forward until it is corrected, things of that nature. So I'm going to go through the other things that you may see on the inventory and appraisal, like a supplement. Typically, I use the supplement box. Specifically, let's say I turned in a final inventory and appraisal and an asset was forgotten about or an asset wasn't listed. A lot of times that could be car, that could be jewelry, that could be, who name many other things. I will mark only the box supplemental, which means I'm just adding to the partial or actually adding to the final. So that's really when I use the words the box supplemental. A corrected is if a client or someone has turned in a final or a partial and something on it was inaccurate, like the dollar figure on, because that's the next thing I'll do is match the bank statements, and I'll get through that as I go to the second page. But if I need to do a corrected, meaning the person already turned in an inventory and appraisal, and they stated the bank balance on this day was this 57,844.59. I look at a bank statement and that is not the balance on the day of appointment. It's a different number. Then I'll mark corrected and correct this dollar amount so I can move forward. Lastly is the reappraisal for sale. Only time I want to see this marked is if we're in a probate case where the pro per is given limited authority and they wish to sell the real property, and I need an appraisal within 1 year. Because remember, this appraisal was based on this date, and say we're in 2025 and I need to have property sold, then it would just be the reappraisal, but that is nothing I would use for my accounting. Well, no, it wouldn't, because it just, if this box is marked, this is not an appraisal I will use to start my accounting. You know what the case number means? It means the case number, day of appointment. Remember, this is the date I will use. When you're filling out an inventory and appraisal, what you want to make sure is this date right here is not date of letters. It is date of the order. So if you're talking a conservatorship, I think that's the GC 340. If you're talking a guardianship, same form. If you're talking a probate, it's the now I can't even think it's the DE, sorry, 140. So this is date of appointment. It's very important because this date carries forward to the accounting. Here is assets on attachment 1. We'll go through how to record them, what this number means. This is assets for attachment 2. We will go through that further also. So I'll just actually go down the form and change my teaching a little bit. So completing the form, I want to see number 3 says this is all of the assets. If I'm only doing a partial, this box would mark, or if I'm doing a corrected, I'll also mark this box. If I'm doing a supplement, I'll also mark this box, but I typically want to see that they have stated it's all of the assets. Coming down, whether a probate referee is needed or not. If I only have cash assets and no attachment to assets, I will mark this box, or you will see this box marked. This box is marked if you do have attachment to, and the judge has ordered a probate referee. So I will mark this box and I will put right here the date that the judge ordered the probate referee. Coming down to box 5. Box 5 only has to do if there is real property. So I would mark A if there is no real property. So typically you'll see box A and 4, this box right here, both of these are marked, meaning there is no probate referee needed because I don't have really any real property. But keep in mind that's not always the case, because a probate referee can value vehicles, jewelry, stocks, bonds, other things that don't have anything to do with property tax. I mark 5B when there is real property. 5B indicates that you have filed, or the proper has filed, a change of ownership statement with the county recorder, along with the PCOR, and a lot of other times at the same time you'll be filing a parent-child exclusion, grandparent-grandchild exclusion, if that is who are the heirs. So either A or B will be marked. Coming down, this is going to be the name of the prepper or the administrator or whoever is completing the form. You do not ever sign this form or have the client sign the form until it comes back from the probate referee and it is completed, unless you don't have any assets where a probate referee values, and then in that case it will be signed right then and there. Going down on the form, you're talking about your bond. I kind of glance at this only because during then the accounting, I want to see that bond payments have been made, something of that nature. You'll either state that bond has been waived, there is a bond amount. Typically with pro pers, the minimum, the court issues minimum bond of $20,000. If the pro per is out of state, and there are many other reasons, but I mainly see it mostly if the pro per is out of state. One of the things that's somewhat difficult, and I'm not sure if you all know, but if you are a pro per and the court issues or request bond, and that bond amount is more than $20,000, a pro per must then hire an attorney, because there is not a bond company that I know of in California that will issue a pro per a bond for more than $20,000. So anytime that happens, you typically will see that they have to gain attorney. Otherwise, you will see in cases, say you do get a request that the bond is more than 20, the pro per can obtain the bond, they can switch and ask for limited authority instead of full, and maybe put funds in a blocked account and things of that nature. So that part, they can still get down to the $20,000 bond and the court would still approve them moving forward. We will get into whether this box or this box is marked. Well, I can start now. So if I do have this box marked and there is a bond of $20,000, which is the minimum bond in California, and I immediately look and see my cash is 57,844.59. And I'm going to ask somebody to chime in and answer because I want to make sure you all are awake. If my bond is only 20,000, but my cash is 57, am I marking this box sufficient or insufficient? Anyone? Quick, quick. Come on, somebody come off mic.
Insufficient?
Good job. Good job. You're correct, honey. So please don't feel that if you mark this box insufficient, the court's going to destroy what you did or anything like that. Typically, I don't even think the court looks at it, if you want to know the truth, because I've marked insufficient many times. And that doesn't necessarily mean the court's going to come back and say, okay, now you have to get a bond for more money. That's really going to be dependent on your petition. They're not going to look here. They're actually going to look at the petition to gather that information. So don't feel nervous that you're marking the box that says insufficient. It doesn't mean a whole lot, but you must be honest and say it is insufficient. The next box is if the court ordered that the funds, let's say you still want a full authority, but the court orders any type of cash funds to be placed in a blocked account. Typically, you'll see this with guardianships because minors cannot inherit. So this box will be marked. The amount that's in the blocked account will be listed. This really has no bearing on the accounting we're doing, so I don't pay it much mind. Then there is the date. If there's an attorney, the attorney signs here. If there's no attorney and it is completed by a pro per, the name of the pro per will go in both slots. Again, this is not signed till it comes back from the probate referee. Okay, we're going to get into attachment 1 and things that will go on. What are there any questions? Sorry. Perfect. I'm going to go to attachment 1. Attachment 1, you should always have an attachment 1. Sorry, I'm sliding back. Even if you have no cash assets, I will put the word 0 in here. I usually write the words I see it sometimes where people put 0.00 if there are no cash assets, but I like to write the word zero here, completely up to whoever is completing the form. So we have attachment one. This is only going to be page 1 of 1, and I'm going to give you examples of items that would be put on attachment 1. So again, this is an example for a conservatorship. So it might be different if it's a probate, but cash found at the property. I can tell you with the elderly people, and especially like my father, my mother, they're not here with me anymore, but they always had cash at their house or in their pocket, in their wallet. The older people, they just cash is their comfort. I say it all the time. So if there was cash found on the person, in their wallet, in their house, anything of that nature, you would state it. I'm very particular that I would not write the conservatee's address. Remember, this is public information. And with a conservatorship, I kind of tend to want to be a little discretionary on how much information I provide about a conservatee. I don't want anybody picking this up and saying, oh, the conservatee has a lot of cash at the house. And obviously she's in a conservatorship, which means she or he, sorry, are very vulnerable and things of that nature. So I just would not put the address here. Instead, I would just put words like cash found at conservatee's residence or something a bit more vague. I will indicate the dollar amount. Make sure, even if it's pennies or change, again, here's the other thing that I state that I myself don't really do is my father uh, had cans and cans and cans of pennies. If you think I was going to sit there and count each doggone penny to figure out what to put on an inventory and appraisal, he had a trust, so I didn't have to do one. But I would not have done that because that would have taken me way too long. I will estimate, I will say, a 12-ounce can of Folgers coffee filled with pennies or something like that, and do an estimation on what I feel is in there. Um, so the next will be balance in the checking account. Be very careful. You do not ever list the full account number, especially because it's a valid working account number as opposed to a probate, which would be typically a closed account. So make sure I only list the last 4 digits. It's up to you what digits you list, but I have also seen judges where they see inventory and appraisals that are completed where full account numbers are listed, and the judge had some not so kind remarks to the attorney or the pro per that cannot happen. You must be careful about preserving information about the conservatorships or probates, etc. I typically will not do mine this way. I typically will do Wells Fargo checking account number 4655, and that's it. Especially when you're talking about big banks, having the address of the bank where it's at is just not necessary. So I will not put the bank address. This is very, very, very appointment. The very first thing I do when I get in accounting is I will look. So I'll ask the client for the bank statement. I'm going to switch screens again here. I will make sure that on March 8th, 2012, I'm looking at the bank statement, and if the bank statement does not say this exact amount, I must stop because, again, that means my inventory and appraisal are wrong. You have to be careful. Well, banks are so much better now that they give usually running totals on bank statements because what a lot of people find, which they don't like, is you get a bank statement that goes from the 1st to the 30th. And say you're appointed or your accounting has to start on March 8th, right? It's so you're sitting there going, how the heck do I know what the balance was on March 8th? A lot of times way back, I used to have to take, okay, on March 1st, the balance was $1,000. Then I have deposits. I'll add all of my deposits that happened before March 8th. And then I'll deduct all my expenses that took place before March 8th. And then I come up with a total. That's how I used to do it. But now you see bank statements that run daily totals. Make sure that you're listing what the balance was on that date. Now, it is the balance on that date after checks cleared, or sometimes like people ask me, well, a check cleared on March 8th, which is the day that I have this number. I do not include that check. I state it was written before the appointment of the conservator or the administrator or the guardian, so I don't count it. So I will count what's the end of the day balance on that account. Understand any questions up till that point? If no, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, the next,
What do you do with the outstanding checks? The
the out,
decedent dies March 8th, and a check comes in on the 9th and the 10th and the 11th, and the bank pays them.
well, then you have to record those checks in your accounting, hun. So you're still going to list the dollar, the amount that was on the day of appointment, and then your accounting will show the checks that were written, even though they might not have been written by the appointed person, they still have to be recorded in the accounting. Did I answer your question, hun?
So a check written by the decedent will show up in the accounting as
A
disbursement.
disbursement. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I was clear in understanding. You do the end of day, correct? Not the beginning of the day of the
Correct.
when it appointed.
I do the end of day. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving on. So same thing with savings account, same principle as above. But I just typically will put Bank of America savings account 1234, or no, I don't put 1234, but I give the last four digits of the account number. Same thing, balance, what I'm looking for. CDs or certificates of deposit. I don't see a whole lot of these. I see bonds a whole lot more than CDs. But if you do have CDs, I don't put this detail either. I don't put the bank, what's in the name, is it joint tenants? I just don't. I will just put CD number, and I don't even know I put the full number. But I do put the amount. Now, again, this is an old example. So an uncashed check, typically pensions are direct deposited, they're not issued in a check. So this accounting example, I mean, this example of the INA is an older example where checks used to come. But if this is the case, and you go to the conservatees home and find checks on the table or checks that were never cashed, you will want to list them so that when you get to your accounting and you bring them in as receipts, they will counter each other. You wouldn't even bring them in as a receipt at that point. It's just part of your accounting. but when they're cashed, it will just be a change in form and things like that. But you'll want to list them if you have any uncashed checks. Again, Social Security, same thing. They're typically direct deposited, so you wouldn't usually find an uncashed check. But if you do, you must list it. Another dividend, I don't see these often at all either. A dividend check would be if they have a stock account and instead of doing reinvested dividends, they'll want the dividend check paid out. I do not see these. In fact, I do thousands of accountings. I've never seen one that's had a dividend check issued as a check. But if you do, you must put it there. After I have all of these totals, I will come down to the bottom. I typically mark this as total attachment 1 assets. I don't typically use this same thing. I also typically put it up under here in the middle of the page so it stands out quite a bit. And then I will put the total in here. I do not put my total in this column. I will put it in the middle so that it doesn't get confused and accidentally added with all of these. Then I take this total and I go back to here and I list it under attachment 1. Any questions? Ooh, okay. Let's go to attachment 2 now. Attachment 2 will look very similar to attachment 1. If you're completing these for a client or doing it as a pro per, you want to make sure attachment 1 is only cash. Again, cash can't be anything different than cash. Attachment 2 is everything else. So in our attachment 2, again, mark page 1 of 1. I'm going to give examples on attachment 2 assets. There are many, 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 many more. These are just a small set of examples. So the first one is in the example that the conservatee has a residence. I list mine a tiny bit different. I always want to list if it's 100% owned, 50% owned, 25% owned, things like that, because it's very important for the probate referee to know what percentage of ownership of the property he or she is valuing. So if this person owns property with a sister, a brother, another, family member, I will list 50% interest in real property in the city of, and I will gather this information. I have software, or I'm able to pull deed information. So I look it up and I describe the property using the legal description. A lot of people who are doing this pro per don't have that ability. They may want to gather it from a property tax statement or something like that. If you just don't have the legal description and that information, give as much information as you possibly can. So, like I said, maybe I'd say 100% interest in the real property in the city of Newport Beach, County of Orange, state of California, commonly known as, I'll put the address of the property. I do not put improved single family dwelling, anything of that nature. And I put the APN number. I do mine a tiny bit different in that I will put commonly known as its own line item, and then put the address, and then I put APN as its own line item and put the APN number, so it kind of stands out a little bit for the probate referee. But you do it however you wish. You can follow this example. You can create the second lines just as long as it's together at looking like one paragraph. So I don't put really as much spaces or don't renumber them when you do it. In this case, the person had also a vacation home. Again, I'm listing what their interest, 100%, 25, 50, whatever it is. And I will put as much information as I have, again, commonly known as, I would put as a separate line item, APN number, also a separate line item. You will notice you will not provide value. That's not for you to provide value. That's only for the probate referee. So this must stay blank, even if you know what it is. Even if a realtor had just given you value, market value, you cannot do that because the probate referee must value the property. A lot of times, household furniture and furnishings, I don't see this often, but then I do. It doesn't provide much value at all. In fact, most of the time, even if it is appraised by a probate referee, they typically give small values like 250, 500 is kind of almost the most I've seen, unless it's a really big house and they've considered there's a whole lot of furniture. I will tell you, if there is furniture that you feel that has a higher value than a mattress or a bed or something like that, we're talking antique armoires or china cabinets or really old, beautiful, very, very heavy tables or things like that. I will list those items separately on their own because I really want the probate referee to give that a specific value because I feel it's much more than your everyday used furniture that might be in your living room or something like that. Now, that doesn't mean, though, which some propers get tiny bit offensive. What do you mean the whole house of furniture is only worth $250? We paid a lot of money for that furniture. We understand that, and a probate referee is not looking at the furniture. It's just what would its value be if it was sold in a garage sale or if it was sold in an estate sale or anything, or if it was just sold on the internet like people do now. Its value is likely not going to be that much. I also don't put the address where the where the furniture and fixtures are. I just don't. They can assume it's in one or two places. Now, looking at, since I have a vacation home and real property, maybe I want each valued. So I may say household furniture and furnishings in the residential property or household and furnishings in the vacation home and list them separately if I want two different evaluations. Really, one of the most important things, and think about it this way, is this inventory and appraisal goes out to beneficiaries. They're looking at this saying, this gives them an idea of what the conservator owns, or in many cases of a decedent, what did the decedent leave behind? It helps them understand maybe what they're going to inherit. It helps them understand and know. A lot of times they'll hold the administrator of a probate responsible for these items because you listed on the inventory and appraisal there was all this furniture and furnishings, and now you're saying it's all gone. What happened to it? It's their right to ask what happened to it. In accountings, I'm pretty specific in that if the household furniture and furnishings, which when you get into the accounting, you'll see, are, let's say, given away, dumped, taken to a junkyard, something like that, I will put that in my accounting. I will state that it was whatever happened to it. It was sold in a garage sale, and then I'm going to mark what I received for it, things like that. So list everything you can think of that maybe somebody else would be interested in. Shares in uh, stock portfolio accounts, Morgan Stanley, Charles Schwab's, all of those. Please remember, this can get very tedious and very time consuming because most accounts, most mutual funds have many different stock portfolio or many different shares in many different things like iShares and Microsoft shares and Facebook shares, and I could go on and on. You have to list each one separately. And typically on the mutual fund pages or Morgan Stanley's and Charles Schwab's and all of that, they will list how many shares they are, and they will list a code for that share that helps probate referee provide the value. You do not give value, you just give the shares. But do you know I've had accounts that or prepared inventory and appraisals where I have 5 full sheets of attachment to mutual fund stocks. I had to list every single one separately. And you'll see when you get to your accounting, your beginning assets, you must list every single one separately. So these get complicated. This is for somebody who's prepared a lot of accountings and really know what they're doing because this can get pretty tricky. Moving on, we have in this case 7 bonds and a series. You are never allowed to list 7 100 saving bond series EE and date of issue. You must list each one separately. They will have separate serial numbers to them. Let me tell you, I've also done inventory and appraisals where I've had 4 or 5 pages of one line item. So there's probably, I will estimate, 150 savings bonds can fit to a page, and I had 5. It was not fun. I think I was cross-eyed trying to figure out, and did I have the right series number, and did I make a typo? And the series numbers are so very similar, so I had to review it a second time. It was awful, very time consuming, but we got it done. So list them separately. Do not ever group them like this because they're valued separately. They could be issued at different dates. Again, they'll have different series number. Their values could be different. You must list them separately. Lastly, diamond wedding ring. A lot of people ask me, why is this important? And I'm going to state a few things honestly. Say I was a fiduciary and I saw the conservative with diamond ring. I honestly do not know a whole bunch about diamonds, so I don't know that I would know the difference between a 1 carat or a 2 carat. Or I can tell you when they get bigger, it's just a bigger carat. But so do your very best. Figure it out. Go maybe to a broker or something. Be careful about removing assets because now they're in your control, and God forbid they get lost while they were in control. That could be ugly also. But I always like to state, and I'm going to give a really, really quick example why it's important. I had a trust accounting, which they were forced to do an inventory and appraisal, and they had a 2 carat and a 4 carat diamond ring. Within the trust, one of the nephews was to get the 4, and the other nephew or son or somebody was to get the 2. The trustee, you can say it was accidental. I'm not saying she did anything wrong purposely. That's not my call. But her son was to get the 2 carat, and her nephew was to get the 4. Well, her own son decides to propose to a woman, and the trustee gave her own son the 4 carat instead of the 2. Okay, I know y'all can see a problem with this because y'all are attorneys or law firms, right? Huge problem there. Because it was listed on the inventory and appraisal, because both nephews saw it, because, everybody knew about it, it was in the trust, blah, blah, blah. Well, let me just tell you, her son had to take away the beautiful 4 carat ring from his fiance, which would have been a very awkward, very, very awkward conversation to have, but had to take it away and give it back to the rightful beneficiary. So, I do like to say this. A lot of times I've also seen this come through, and a son or a daughter who might not live in California says, wait a minute, mom had 3 wedding rings because they got remarried, or they split up, or dad bought her a new one because the first one was smaller. Why are you only listing one? Where's the other 2? Where's, it's very nice to have everything here, because if anybody wishes to question, this is one of their opportunities to do so. Okay, any questions on that? Also, sorry, before we get into questions, other things I will list here. Vehicles, very important. When you list a vehicle, you want year, make, model. If you can get VIN number, you want mileage on the vehicle. You want to know if it's in good condition, non-running condition. Does it have an engine in it? Are there doors missing? Are seats inside missing? Basically, you're telling that probate referee whether it's a sellable car or a car with value, or is it really just an abandoned vehicle in the backyard, that even if somebody tried, it's going to take a whole lot of money to get it up to a good condition. Make sure you state all of that on your inventory and appraisal, because that helps the probate referee determine value. Again, I'm going to go to questions in just 1 second. Let me finish just the end of this form. So again, I will put total attachment to assets. I put it in the middle right here typically, and I will put a dollar amount. I leave it blank because that's where the probate referee comes in and puts the value on his or her own. Are there any questions on this part of the form, or what an attachment to asset would be?
How do you know that a CD is attachment 1, but a mutual fund is attachment 2?
One of the things as an attorney, hun, I can tell you this, or even pro pers, if you go and do an internet search for probate referee, I think it's probate referee guidelines or probate referee manual or something of that nature, you will see in there that you can do a find or a search, and you can type whatever your asset is. You can type it in, and typically it will tell you which attachment that should go on, or if a probate referee should value it, or if an administrator should value it. The reason a CD, I will state that I know of, the reason the CD would be attachment 1 is it's basically cached. It can be quickly or not so quickly, but it can be turned into cash very easily. Yes, a car can also, but car has many factors, whereas a CD, there's only one factor. What's the interest that's been, or whatever is the interest that was on it when it was purchased and things of that nature. It's just considered a cash asset. But again, very helpful because I've referred to it many times myself when I've completed these. I will go to the probate referees manual guidelines. It's something like that. And I will look up some assets and who should value them. It's very easy. It should come right up. And if you can't find it, let me know. Again, I've left my email address. Let me know, and I can look it up for you and provide you a link. Did that help, Jeff?
Well, I've looked up lots of stuff on the internet and it's almost always wrong.
No, sorry, hun. This is specific to only the California Probate Referee Manual.
So
It's the
you're so you
manual they have to use. They're mandated to that's their guidelines. That's not just a AI or a internet search or something that I created or somebody else created.
so you believe if we back it up, we'll find a statute or something that says so
Yes,
and so shall generate a manual and be used by all courts in this state. All right,
that's correct, hon. Yes.
thanks.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Moving on. So I leave the attachment two section blank. I will tell you when you get it back from the probate referee, they will put the value in here that they have listed on the bottom or listed in this section or at the bottom. They will automatically fill that part in here and they will total it. So they will take this number and their amount, and they will provide a total right down here. They will also, on page 2 of the inventory and appraisal, they will put what their commission is. Typically, it's 0.01% of the value given or what they valued. And they will add expenses. Their expenses will be, let's say, toll, mileage. If they had to order copies of things, maps, anything of that nature, any expense to them, they will add it in here. They will provide a total here. This goes to the court, so the court's able to see what the probate referee billed for their services. That probate referee will date it, they will put their name here, and they will sign it. Again, they will send it back to you with all 4 pages, or all pages. In our instance, we only have 4. And that is the time that an attorney or a pro per then can date and sign it once they viewed it and they feel it's accurate. I always state first, if it's an attorney, send it to the client to sign first. Attorney always signs last, and then you'll file that with the court. But again, that's that step. When I'm going to start an accounting, I'm looking for all that done. Um, I'm looking for all that done before I even start my accounting. Any questions? Because I'm now going to release it to Rex to start the accounting, and then I'll come back with the petition on once your accounting's done, how you file. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to disappear while he talks and I'll come back a little later. I will answer a couple things in the chat that I see, but otherwise I'll be silent throughout the rest of. Rex, you ready? I'm going to stop my sharing and give it back to you.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Host has been given back to you, Rex.
Okay, let me get set up on the share screen here. Okay, we've got this. We've got share.
Sorry, I want to say anything. Jeff, so it looks like you found it, right?
I believe that's the document you're referring to, and if you take a
It
look
looks
at it,
like it. Yeah, it does look like it.
and
Although this is
it does say that money market mutual funds are attachment one, but all other mutual funds are attachment two.
that correct. Yes. But very, very helpful guide. So please keep it very helpful guide. And I've used it often, and I will tell you, knock on wood, I have not had an accounting rejected.
Okay, so now I want to continue on with the GC 400 sum, which is called the Summary of Account
Sorry,
Standard and
Rex,
Simplified
sorry,
Accounts.
and I'm not seeing your full, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm not seeing your full, I'm seeing half the page of 20 and then only half of your GC page. Can you adjust your GC 400 some page, hon?
Is that better?
No, it didn't change.
Okay. Well, it's full
Or
on
at
my,
least slide your page down so it doesn't show both. There you go, a little bit better, but can
well,
you make yours maybe your screen a little bit smaller so they can see the whole form? Sorry, guys.
okay, we'll just take care of this. It says share. My screen is
The percentage up top here, hun, change it from 100, maybe go down just a tiny, tiny bit. There you go. That's how about everybody else? Can you all see that okay? It's showing a full screen. Nobody's commenting.
okay.
Um, but
Well, you can see it, Tamara. We'll go with that.
yeah,
Um, I might just for my eyes enlarge it a little bit, but I don't want to cut it off. So in your follow along handout, want to point out the page numbers. The lower left, we put Bates numbering in and the large numbers with 4 zeros and a 21. And I'll refer to where I am with the numbers that show there as page numbers. They're not going to be the same page numbers as if your PDF number.
sorry, Rex. The request has been, can you increase it a little bit? It's rather a tiny bit small.
Okay,
Maybe go to maybe type in there and do 90.
90.
Looks good to me. I don't know
Okay,
if
so it just cuts off a little of the footer, but
right.
we'll go with that. And if you could watch the chat because I don't have it open on my screen.
Will do.
Okay, so what I was saying is the bottom left of the forms, we have page number 21 in terms of the my PDF page, it's 23, so I point out that mismatch. Um, what we have here is the what we call the GC 400 sum, and it's the required form for the court accounting. It's the pivotal. It's like the center axle in a bicycle wheel. Everything comes back, all the spokes come back to this form, and this is the um, top sheet for an account. The lower left shows that it's judicial counsel form and that it's approved for mandatory use. So this form is not optional and it's required for all court accounting submitted, even if you end up having a software package that shows the same kind of information, you'll need to add GC 400 on top of that to be in compliance. The top part of the form, there's no place to show. I generally deal with trusts more than guardianship or conservatorship. So if I'm doing a trust accounting, I need to write that on the top of the form. And it is appropriate for it. It's required. It doesn't say it as such, but it says for probate, guardianships, and conservatorships. Okay. So we have summary of account, standard and simplified. I'll just define the simplified account, and that is, I never use them. If you had a guardianship, for example, and they had 10 transactions for the year, the simplified accounting format is very much like a check register. It just shows each transaction, what it was for, and not broken out into categories, shows income and description. So we're not going to cover that. List which account is it? This example is the first account. And so if it was a decedent, it would be from the date of death to the day before 365 days. And the terminology, having an accounting background, this terminology is goofy in my view, or unusual. Arcane might be another adjective. Charges and credits. The way that you can think of this charges and credits is that you're charged with responsibility for that money. And if it disappears, you're going to be charged with personal liability for that money. So, and then the credits has nothing to do with credit cards. Credits are you're relieving yourself of personal liability on these funds because of appropriate disbursements with proper documentation. When we start out, we have to start out with property on hand at the beginning of the period. And these two numbers, the cash assets as of the beginning of the account and the non-cash assets, come from your initial inventory and appraisal or updated inventory and appraisal that Tamara just outlined. So these two numbers end up being a copy job, and that's your starting point. So the top part of the form, charges, these are all pluses, lines 2 through 6, all money coming in, money going out, lines 8 through 12 or the negatives, and then we'll get into the ending balances for the account. There's a term that's prominent throughout the accounting, and that is called carry value. If you look at this responsibility as a burden, you're carrying that burden. But carry value is the market value at the date that you took over the trusteeship or executorship. And that carry value does not change throughout the accounting for this entity, even if it goes, I've seen them go 35 years, that carry value carries forward. Carry value in terms of comparable definitions in income tax, it's similar to the word basis. But you cannot use court accounting for income tax purposes because there are complete different systems. The fiduciary accounting that you would do for a trust or an estate is based on the Internal Revenue Code, and this fiduciary accounting that we're talking about today is based on California Probate Code statutory requirements. So what we're going to do is delve into the details of these line items, and you can look at this similar to looking at a web page where you have a link. Okay, Schedule A, well, or Schedule B. You back in the detail, you have to have supporting schedules that come up to that total. And there are required formats that we're going to be talking about. One of the simplest or overriding principles of fiduciary accounting is the balancing feature. So we have beginning assets, carry value, plus everything that came in, give me a total on line 7. And then we have all the money going out, what happened, okay, and what assets are left. And we have on line 14 another balance. And if line 7 and 14 do not balance, the probate examiners are going to kick it out. So you wouldn't even file it. Unfortunately, compared to income tax, we don't use pennies anymore. We just round to the nearest dollar. But the court system is a little more anal retentive. They don't allow you to round numbers. So you have to indicate every transaction to the penny. Another feature when I'm doing the accounting is we have items, blank lines. So we enter a 0 on there to make an affirmative statement that there are none. It's preferred compared to just leaving it blank and, oh, possibly forgot. So this form, if you mark it, if you print it out or you have a bookmark, we're going to be going into a lot of different schedules and coming back to this form. So keep it available because we're going to be flipping back and forth. So the next form we're getting into the details that comprise the summary of account. This list of assets at the beginning of the account period is almost identical to the pages that you used for the inventory and appraisal. So we have the cash assets and the value. What should be there instead of value is the word carry value. And the first account is just going to be carried over. There's going to be no difference. One thing I wanted to point out in terms of sometimes I'll see conservatorships where a spouse has to do an accounting for an incapacitated spouse. So the situation is husband and wife own all their property, community property, and they go to the guardianship, filing, get it approved by the court, and then they find out they're burdened with an accounting requirement. That's improper, incorrect, should not be, because both community owners, husband and wife, have unlimited access to manage those assets. So you should petition or note to the court that no accounting will be provided because of probate section 351, 354, 3051, 3054, and 3055. So the competent spouse does not have to do an accounting. There's another exception to the accounting, and that is for small estates under probate code section 2628. If there's a small estate that has assets less than $15,000, you can get the court to waive the accounting requirement every year. So in terms of the timeline for filing these accountings, say you're appointed as guardian, conservator, or executor, 120 days from appointment, then you'll need to file with the court your inventory and appraisal. And then the annual accounting comes about after the end of the first year and then every odd year thereafter. So what that means is probate required after year 1, 3, 5, and year 7 for long-term administrative trusts or estates. Just like on the inventory and appraisal, now we have the non-cash assets, and the carry value will always be the same. I have a recommendation on showing the carry value of all the assets, and that is use an asset numbering system that never changes. So what I mean is you've got assets 1 through 10, just give them line numbers 1 through 10. And then if you sell an asset during the administration, say you sold asset number 7, leave that number out and never use it again. And the reason for my recommendation is that when probate examiners or beneficiaries are examining multiple years of assets, they can readily tell which assets are still there. The next item on this form, we're on page 21, 1B, is carry value, or correction, estimated market value. Not needed on your first account, it will be needed subsequently. And what usually goes here is the fair market value of the house, be an example, or the fair market value of the stock portfolio. And you want to list that there because sometimes there's a question that the fiduciary is not prudently managing the assets and putting things in too much risk, but by disclosing the balances, that reduces the risk because the beneficiaries have opportunity to object. And by using the market value, estimated market value, I'm not talking about getting another appraisal as a stringent requirement like we did on the initial inventory and appraisal from the probate referee numbers. This can be just a simple Zillow or Redfin market value, but and you're not lying to the court if you get estimated market value. It's just a good faith estimate, so don't sweat it from a fiduciary liability issue. So there's another form if you're doing these manually, and that is a summary of the subschedules. The way that the judicial council forms are designed, there's subschedules for line number A or assets income, like dividends, interest, rents, and this is a summary sheet that says don't file with the accounting, but I don't think they'll shoot you if they do file it. I like using this form if it's manually prepared because I can cross-reference subschedules to the summary sheets. On page 23, we're starting in the different subcategories of income. This one is dividends, so that'd be money earned on mutual funds or securities. And you must list every asset transaction. So when you get the broker statement, you cannot take the total amount of dividends for the quarter and say, we got this amount. You have to list every dividend payment that was received. And that can be a problem sometimes with large portfolios because of the large number of transactions. So it becomes a bookkeeping problem. There's a common practice among investment portfolio managers in that you take the dividends and you say to the broker, please reinvest that in the stock. That's called a dividend reinvestment program. We abbreviate that DRIP. And what happens there is, in terms of accounting, you end up needing to show all of the dividends received as income. Then on the investment schedule, we'll cover later, you have to show that this 0.783 purchase of stocks from dividends, and it creates a whole lot of extra unnecessary work. What I would advise is telling the broker, take all the dividends, don't reinvest any, put them into the cash or money market account at the brokerage house, and then I'll personally go in every quarter, for example, and reinvest the money at one time. It'll reduce the amount of effort you have to do all the account posting. We're not going to cover all the judicial counsel forms, fortunately for you, because there are 48 different judicial counsel forms for fiduciary accounting. So if you're looking for a transaction, you need a format assistance, do look online on the judicial counsel forms so that you might get some additional guidance in for more rare transactions. Talking about rare transactions, this book that we're talking about here today, I just want to get into reference on that. Okay, the material that we're using today is from the Handbook for Conservators. Okay, it's published by the Judicial Council. It's available free from on the internet. And I just pointed out what we're covering is the complete section on accounting, but there are other guidance pages for conservators, guardianships, and trustees. So I point out that this book is available online so that you have it available should you want it. Then the other reference material I point out to you is this book called the Fiduciary Accounting Handbook. And this book is from Continuing Education of the Bar, CEB, and it's quite thick. Don't get it thinking that you're going to learn court accounting with this book because it's way too detailed. The attorney Margaret Hand in our county here in Contra Costa, Northern California, wrote the book. And what she did was take every kind of court transaction and look up the reference, and that's what it is. It's a reference book. It's fairly costly. I think the current price is, maybe $350. But if you're doing a lot of accountings, this reference book is invaluable. The next page that we'll be on is interest income. List each of them. each transactions. The way the form is designed by judicial counsel is you don't carry over or accumulate your subtotals. You have each page and then you got page A2 of 6. And then every so often we'll run when we get out of the A series, which is income, then we'll total them. Here I point out again from a different viewpoint, it says this form is approved by judicial counsel for optional use, not required. If you want to use it, fine. If you have a spreadsheet, fine. We're covering the judicial counsel forms. You can reformat your forms as you feel are necessary. In the description, we list the name of the vendor or financial institution, bank. Then what we do is put loan account number, but we only list the last 4 digits so that this public record, the court file, is not available for scammers to get the bank account information. Okay, then we have receipt of pensions. This form does not want Social Security benefits. In this case, you list out who the pension's from and every dollar amount that comes in. Then we get into receipts for rent. I would break these out by property, list the name of the property, say, single family residence, 100-unit apartment complex. Let the reader understand what kind or size of property you're dealing with in number of units. This form is for rental property, which implies passive rentals. This is not a form to be used for businesses. So an example of rentals that might not be appropriate here are Airbnb operations because of the short-term turnover of customers, a bed and breakfast, a hotel where extra services are provided. If that is what you have, then you have a different type of accounting because it's a business. You end up needing to do regular business accounting. And you'll notice on the GC 400 sum, page 21, on line 6 is a net income from trade or business. And then on line 12, it's a loss, net loss from trade or business. Okay, so fortunately for fiduciaries, if there's a business operation, you can use the CPA's financial statement prepared on generally accepted accounting principles for your number, and all you have to do is enter in the bottom line. So that makes it a lot nicer, easier in that respect. Okay, let me get back. Okay. Trying to find my place here. There's rents. Okay, then moving on. Here's Social Security, income. Couple notes here. The probate examiners in our county are required to take our course. So every time there's a new probate examiner, they're in our class. And we had a very experienced probate examiner taking the class one time, and immediately, 2 seconds, it took her to point out that there was a problem with this form, that it's unacceptable. You cannot do what it shows here. it shows Social Security payments over 3 months, 1 quarter at 2271. Absolutely prohibited. You must list every transaction by date, not summarizing. Another distinction is that it says there that the amounts showing here are net. Okay, net of Medicare Part B. As a fiduciary, you're only responsible for the money that you're able to control. So if the actual Social Security was 1,000 a month and the other part was Medicare you didn't get, do not list that total grossed up number because you can't do anything with it. Then we have the next category here is receipts other, and my term for this is just miscellaneous expenses, different costs for administration of the guardianship or the conservatorship or trust, in whatever type of transaction. It's kind of a catch-all. So the next page, we have the sale of a principal residence. So we had a house in Palm Springs and it was sold for 250,000 a while back. And it had a carry value of 230,000. Well, the form and the requirements are to show the gain without any sales costs. So what you want to get is what they call the final real property closing statement, not the preliminary closing statement, and list out the gross sale price and what the carry value was. And the form says this is the gain. And my view is no, it is not the gain, because there was probably 40,000 of closing costs, real estate broker fees, and we'll get to where those go later, but it's just the format requirement to show it at the gross capital gain rate. Next item in disbursements are conservatives residential care. We just list what was paid to the nursing home each month from their statements. Other things in this case, generally we show items like personal care, hairstyling, trips for the conservatee. We show those on other schedules. This is just for the housing. Okay, so well, I let me just catch up here. So back on the miscellaneous expenses, you'll see we had schedule page A6 of 6. Okay, so at that point, what that signals is that we have exhausted and posted all of the income items by category. And then what we need to do is go back to the GC 400 sum on page 21 and list on line 3, Schedule A, all the income that came in during the property. Then we also show the gain on the sale of the house. And at that point, we have exhausted the required posting items, transactions for the charges. So then we will move into the disbursements section, going the other direction, money going out. Okay, so the first disbursement in this case is selling a house. Then we get into conservatives housing. Then we get into distributions for general administration expenses, um, court costs, attorney's fees. Not really attorney's fees. You cannot take attorney's fees or executor fees in a probate or guardianship conservatorship without court approval. So the only thing you're allowed to pay on your own without court order is reimbursements. In this case, the attorney is getting reimbursed for court costs. Um, we generally don't pay those interimly and wait for the judge to sign off and approve it. And here we have the probate referee fee. So this is just a miscellaneous. Then we get into other disbursements. Um, we got the living, these are various kinds of living expense, not for the nursing home. So basically the personal disbursements of the conservatee. I want to put out a reference note for you, although not covering it in detail, some helpful IRS forms related to decedent's estates and trust accounting. And that is the IRS Form 56. This form informs the IRS that the fiduciary is doing the tax reporting requirements so that the IRS sends all the paperwork to the fiduciary. Then, in terms of a guardianship or conservator, there's an IRS Form 2848, and that's a power of attorney form. Just because someone's an attorney, that doesn't mean they can represent a taxpayer. You have to get a power of attorney form on the IRS Form 2848 to get responses and information from the IRS. And then when in a decedent's estate, when there's a refund on the last final 1040 individual tax returns, you have to include a Form 1310, which is you're promising to IRS that you're going to handle the funds appropriately, identify the probate, if any, and reassure the IRS that the refund is going to the proper places. Another thing that might be helpful at times, sometimes we're doing estate and trust administration, and the person hasn't filed their tax returns for 3 or 4 years. What we do in that case is we fill out a form 4506T as in Tango and request that the IRS give us the details in their computer database. So that would be all the 1099s, W-2s, balances, 5498 forms for balances on pensions and distributions. And that's quite helpful to know what the IRS shows, because sometimes at decedent's estate, it's hard to get the income information all in one place for tax processing. Another admonition on doing fiduciary accounting is to double check every addition and subtraction that you do. Don't just take the numbers and put them down. Double check every number, and you'll find out why that's a good idea when you don't balance at the end of the accounting period. It takes a lot of time to go back through and try to find an imbalance. And it's much easier to double check your numbers and get an error in a computation early in the process. Okay, disbursements, medical, anything you might have here. List the that's just the amount paid by the ward, not the amount of the bill. So if they have a copay, that's what we're talking about, actual money being paid out. Disbursements for, this is property sale. This is what I was talking about, getting the final closing statement for the house sale. List all the details for the commissions, the closing costs. What you have in this area is a mix of different types of expenses. The expenses that show here are what are called non-recurring closing costs. So, but for us selling that house, we would not have had those costs. That's appropriate here. There are a lot of other costs that you'll see on a final closing statement, and those are called recurring closing costs, and you don't list those here. That would be like a proration of property tax. Either it turns into income or expense, but it needs to get posted under other sections of the accounting. So anything that was a reoccurring item is not listed here. So at this point, we have other costs, disbursements. This happens to be percentage on a consignment sale for furniture. The ward is no longer going to use the furniture. It was put out on a consignment. This is what was dispersed as part of that commission. I had the opportunity this week of going to an estate consignment store in Pleasant Hill, California, and it had information related to valuing jewelry and watches. This particular outfit, estate consignment company, has all their own resources to verify what is actually gold. They can verify diamonds, that they're actually diamonds and not cubic zirconium, and that might be handy sometime if there's jewelry collections in the estate, to get the beginning carry value by a company such as this. And if it's a decedent's estate and you're selling it, it would also be a source to sell to get the highest value for the jewelry and watches. Okay, then we go to disbursements of rental properties. To list them, I would put the name of the property if there's more than one, and then the disbursements and the name of the other property. List all the, these are loan payments, not the principal and interest split out separately. That's more of a tax concept. Then disbursements, other expense. This is the miscellaneous for the disbursement side of the ledger. Some other costs that might be included in this Schedule C disbursements, other expenses might be court-approved allowance to the ward, household repairs, recreation and leisure for the conservatee bank, financial expense, postage, pet expenses, basically any other cost for administration. So at this point, we're on the disbursements C, page C. We're on 8 of 8 pages, so we're done with the disbursements, so we need to bring them back to the GC 400 sum, back where we were before. on page 21, and we're listing all the disbursements on line 8 of the GC 400 sum on the materials, page 21. Okay. So then we go back to losses during the period. Let me get that worked out here. Okay. So losses during the period, list those. I know probate examiners are really concerned about this area. They're worried about executor mismanagement and causing losses. So they like a lot of detail. What we'll do on losses is we put a footnote describing why the loss was there. What happened, what caused it to be a loss. Because what probate examiners like to do is they say, you lost money, and let's say there's a statutory probate fee. They like to reduce the probate fee by any executor caused losses. So that's where the disclosure comes in handy. Another disclosure that we don't have in the material, and that's a Schedule F, as in Foxtrot, change in form of assets. So an example of that would be you had 100 shares of Apple stock, and then the stock split 2-for-1. Now you have 200 shares. So that's a change in form of asset that you would show because your inventory and appraisal is going to be different now. Another item that would be good to show on change of form of assets is, let's say you closed out a bank account and you went from Wells Fargo and closed an account and opened up a new bank account at Bank of America. So it's still change of form. In this case, it was a change of vendor, but it helps the probate examiners and the judge determine what happened to that cash account at Wells Fargo. You've got it included. Now, we list the final loss items, and when we're on the GC 400 sum, basically we're done with the disbursement section. So we listed all of these items on the credit. So we've been working our way down this GC 400 sum, and now we're at the end of the account period, in this case, March 7th, and we need to show what assets are on hand at the end of the account period. Okay, so we're on page 39. List the reconciled balances of all the cash accounts. Take the total forward to the GC 400 sum. And then we have the carry value of all the non-cash assets in the right column. And here again, we have the column for estimated market value. So those items will be brought forward to the GC 400 sum. And then, drum roll please, we then determine whether it balances or not. And if it doesn't, you're not done. Now, we've gone through the forms. As I mentioned, the GC 400 sum is always required. If you do it on a different format, do the accounting on a different format, like a spreadsheet type format, I'll just give you an example of one of those. So I mentioned you need to put a cap sheet on this being the summary of account, and then you would list all this is the beginning inventory and appraisal in a spreadsheet format, number of shares. On the second accounting, include the fair market value. And then this accounting has been organized in two ways. One way, it is showing all of the transactions chronologically. And then after it shows all the transaction, we're in receipts. Then it goes into receipts by category, what by vendor or by topic. And so we got all the income in two different formats. And then the gain on sale. Then we get into the disbursements. And this format shows all the disbursements chronologically first, and then gets into the disbursements by category, losses on sales, distributions to beneficiaries are here listed by beneficiary. And then the final page would be the cash and carry value of all the cash and non-cash assets that is brought forward to the GC 400 sum. So we've explained the income and expense accounting reporting requirements based on judicial council forms. And we've also given you the example, which is in your handout, an example of property on hand at the end of in a computerized format, Excel or some other type of program. So let's see. The other thing I point out is if you want a not a continuation credit, but just a certificate of completion for the court accounting class, you can send me an email and our office will give you the completion certificate. Unfortunately, there's no continuing legal education on the class at this time. With that, I'd like to return control of the meeting to Tamara. And if you have any questions, either today or on other days, you can contact our office. Sometimes email's a better way at first. I'm trying to locate the transfer. There we go. If you'll give me a second here, Tamara, I'm not seeing your image to be able to transfer the screen to you. Let's go back this way. Okay, let me try this one. I'm working through the technology here. So, okay, Tamara, I'm going to make you host and you can continue on with your subject matter of the petition to the court to submit the accounting.
Okay, I don't see you've transferred it to me yet.
Okay, now it looks like
There it goes. I got it.
you have it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to see that your screen so I can give you feedback there. Okay, so I see the petition and it's your class right now. Go ahead, please.
Okay, welcome back. I'm going to try and go somewhat quickly through. I want to tell you at the very beginning, this petition, what it does is it asks the court for the approval of the accounting you've just completed. Please understand this is for a conservatorship, a probate accounting petition, completely different. So don't follow this format if it's a probate. But for guardianships and conservatorships, this will work. I do mine a tiny bit different. I will tell you that I do my accounting different than Rex does. So don't feel that one way is the only way, or what we are teaching is the only way things can be done, because people do them differently, but as long as the data is what the court wants to see, it's still good. Okay, so the petition itself has to be on pleading paper. Up top, again, same caption, what court, the name of the case number. Here you will write if it's a first, second, or third. Understand, just I'm going to say this just because we have a lot of law firms here. If this is not your first accounting, the steps we went through this morning are not going to work for you. If it's your second accounting, all you have to do, or the only difference is you take the first accounting's ending assets, cash and non-cash, and you slide them over to become your beginning assets for a second accounting, and then you follow the same steps through the accounting. I hope I didn't confuse you by just saying that, but I wanted to let you know, if this is not your first accounting, that's how you would start a second, a third, a fourth, what have you. Also be very diligent and understand that whomever is preparing this accounting, there can possibly be a time where you are called as a witness or be called into court. I will tell you right now, this is the first time it's happened, and I've prepared accountings for quite some time, but I'm in 2 court cases down in LA where I myself need to testify on the accounting that was prepared. Thankfully, the accounting was prepared properly, but there, there's a few things that I had going on that made the accounting extremely difficult. And we're talking a $15 million accounting, so there was a lot in it. But I've been called to testify. Of course, the attorney that I prepared it for will be there with me, and all will be good. But just keep that in mind, that you really want to make sure your data is accurate. You ask every question you possibly can. If you don't see something, like for instance, one of the things that I go through is, say for instance, I see money transferring from account A to account B, but I wasn't provided a statement for account B. I typically will stop right then and there and say, hey, I'm still missing something. The other thing, if I can give you any words of advice, because it happens to me time and time and time again, is that clients or law firms like to piecemeal the bank statements. Like, okay, I have them from 2024, but I don't have 23 yet. Can you get started? Yes, you can. But I'm telling you, 9.5 times out of 10, I don't balance when I do it that way. It's so confusing to understand where you were, where you started, where I'm off balance, things like that. The other thing I suggest is, if you're doing a couple of years, sometimes I get them for 4 and 5 years. I will typically take the first 2 years. That's typically my cutoff. So I will take the first 2 years. I will only enter the data for that, and then make sure I balance. Because if I don't balance those first 2 years, I know now that I just have to go through 2 years of data instead of all 5. And I can usually find my error rather quickly when that happens. So I break them up. Now, that doesn't mean I print it and turn it into a final form and share it with anybody. No, I just make sure it's balanced, and then I'll carry on with the rest of my time frame. So that is also very helpful. Countings get extremely ugly when you have a lot of mutual fund stocks and a lot of buy sells. Um, you have to remember a lot of times what happens is, say for instance, and I'm talking more a probate as opposed, or a trust as opposed to a conservatorship accounting, where a lot of the times the banks force the administrator to open up new accounts. They'll close the decedent's account on that day and they'll open new ones. A lot of times I see, or sometimes they just switch accounts for whatever reason being. You have to be really conscious in the fact that when you switch, especially those accounts, if you have many different, let's say, stock accounts, and the carry value, or the when it was purchased, was say $1 a share. I'm just going to use the example. Then you sell it, it's $5 a share. And then when you purchase it again to open up the new account, it might be $3.23 a share. You have to change your carry value within that time period, because the carry value that you used at the beginning is not going to be your carry value the same at, once it switches accounts. And that was my number one, let's say, irritation, and I could never balance and I couldn't figure it out and things of that nature. I also, when I'm doing things for reinvested dividends, when there's reinvested dividends, I will keep like a separate like spreadsheet, and I mark down, or on my change of forms when I reinvest. Okay, so when you have a reinvested dividend and you're paid a dividend, so I mark that as a receipt, but then that they purchase shares, I will put on my change in form the same date I purchased maybe one share at $3.50 at that time. So now some of my shares, say I have 100 shares total, some shares will only have a carry value of $3. I may have 10 shares that have a carry value of $3.48. And then I may have 5 shares that may have a carry value of $4. That's when it gets extremely complicated. So if you're really just starting off on doing accountings, please don't take those kind of accountings, because you'll only be so frustrated and a lot of time will be wasted. Just get yourself really familiar on the easier accountings first before you dig into the really complicated stock transfers and things like that. Or maybe do a practice run before or on your own before you actually try to attempt that. And if you are hiring somebody else to do it or help you with it, so you can see what a first one would look like, make sure you please ask that person, how many court accountings have you done in the past? What is your rate of approval on them? What is your experience and things like that? Make sure you hire the proper person for the job. I will tell you, in this one that I'm going to court with, they hired 4 big 4 firms to do the accounting before they hired me, and they could not produce an accounting and wasted months and months. So what happened was, when I got the accounting, at that point, it's a rush now. And when I have to do a rush accounting, scares me to death, because then I'm panicked and I'm hurrying, and I'm worried, and I'm worried about accuracy and things of that nature. So it really puts a burden when something becomes a rush, because then it can't be reviewed. So just please consider those things when you're doing an accounting. Otherwise, you really will do okay. I get a lot of countings where they're rejected by the court. I can typically point out or see pretty soon on my review what was wrong, why the court rejected it, how to correct it. Again, I've left my email address. If you have simple questions like, can you please just glance at this? Where did I go wrong? Where am I starting? I can glance and lead you in the right direction. But if it takes more than hour of my time, of course, I would need to bill you for that. But at least I'm somebody that you could go to, and I typically can answer the question for you. So I'm going to dig into the petition now. Um, let's go on. In this case, or my sample, it's my first account that I'm turning in. So first account and report. You want to make sure that this caption reads everything that you're going to be asking for in the petition. So in this case, I'm asking for the court to review and later on down in the prayer, approve what I've done during the account period. So it's going to be the first account and report, the petition for the settlement, approval of sale, allowance of conservator and attorney fees. Please, some attorneys know this, some do not. An attorney should never, ever accept fees ahead of the court authorizing those fees on a conservatorship case. If you do, you can get away with making sure you put them in your trust account. They're not spent until the court has approved your fees. Otherwise, you have to state within your petition the probate code that allows you to accept those fees. I've had many attorneys get very much slapped on the hand because they didn't know. And there's been times some attorneys have had to return fees. Plus, that just doesn't look good at the courts. Typically, I will say down south, their courts are a little bit finickier than north courts on attorneys being paid prior to court approval. But remember, you cannot do that. So be careful. Probate, you can't either. Probate statutory fees. So just be careful. A conservator who is a pro per can never pay themselves any conservator fees. I don't even like when they do reimbursements to themselves without getting court approval, because that's looked at strongly. So a lot of times, unfortunately, whoever takes on as the conservator, sometimes they front a lot of fees, and they don't get reimbursed until they turn in a petition. So just be very careful about that. You could possibly add in here things like reimbursement of conservatorship expenses, reimbursement of attorney expenses. It could also say in here, there's a possibility some do for probate, it's a preliminary distribution, but just remember you have to do a NOPA or a notice of proposed action to be able to do that. So make sure your caption reads what you're actually asking for in your petition. The date of hearing will be left blank. The court will fill in the date of hearing once you submit this petition with your accounting. The time will be left blank. You will have the words date of hearing and time. You just will not put this date and time in here. You should know your department that you're in, whatever court. I do not ever put in judicial officer. It's not required. It is not needed. And also consider the fact that if I put Michael R. Jones and you get to court that day and you have a pro tem or somebody else who is hearing the case, then your petition, they have to cross this out, they have to put their name, things of that nature. I do not put that on there. It goes more on the order after the fact. And we'll get to that maybe a little bit if I have time once I get through the petition. So I do not put who the judicial officer is. Okay, so it's always started off. I switch mine a little bit. Again, I'm just giving you how you can do it. This example shows how you can do it. I do mine a tiny bit different. If you do yours different, nothing wrong with that. It doesn't have to be exactly like this. This is just helpful information of what should be included, however you write it. So I myself use this name. I typically put it all in caps. I will say David Lowry. I always include hereinafter, I'll quote, either I'll call him conservator, but I can also put a slash saying I refer to him as David and then close quotes, so that if I use the word David down the line where I only want to use David and not a full name, they understand who I'm referring to. Then I'll put petitioner as the conservator of the estate and person. Again, being a conservator of a person, you will not do an accounting. So, it's kind of common sense that they're conservator of the estate, but if they're also of the person, I'll include that in. And what I do is I present for settlement and allowance his or her, and then verified, and then I copy the name of my caption, and that goes all down here. I don't do it like they do it here. I recopy this caption after I say verified so that they know. Then petitioner respectfully states, and here's the information that you must state. Number one, appointment. So this petitioner was appointed on this date. Remember, this is the same date right here. Again, order. This is referring to the order, not necessarily when letters were issued. So this date is the same date, and I'm going to switch screens on you just to show you as that we have right here. Okay. Although if you're doing a second petition, right, you're not going to refer to the inventory and appraisal. So that's the date of the order. And also letters were issued a different date. It could be because there was a bond. It could be because I will tell you that Northern California, they still force you to have live signatures when you turn in letters. Down south, they allow DocuSign letters now, and they allow letters to be e-filed or submitted electronically. So it's a little bit different down south than it is here, Northern California, where I am. But there could be different dates from when letters were issued as opposed to when the order was issued. But at all times, David, our petitioner, has been acting as conservator. Okay, so the inventory and appraisal, again, you would really only list this on your first account petition. The inventory and appraisal was turned. What day was it filed with the court? That date will be right here. You will see a filed date. If it hasn't been filed, you shouldn't even have started the accounting. You should have said, hey, I can't start this. I need this filed or something of that nature. But that's the date that you will put, what date it was filed, the value it was showing. So even though our sample, let's go back, only shows this, what happens is the probate referee gave a value. The total right here will be that total that you will include right here. So that's my total assets. One thing that a probate examiner will do is they will immediately go back to the inventory and appraisal, verify here, and then if I look at, I'm gonna go to my accounting, give me 1 second, IGC 400, they're gonna look here and that number better be exactly the same here. Got it? I know I switched screens on you pretty quickly, but I think you all understand where I'm at. And now I gotta get back to my petition, which is in a couple different places. I'm sorry. Come back here. Sorry. So that's the number you'll find here. Page 2, if that's where I'm going, my period of account, I list that the accounting I did was from March 8th. Again, you always want it at the beginning if it's your first one, through March 7th. A lot of times one of the rejection items will be your account period does not start on the proper date. Then I'm going back and that's an instant, okay, let me look at the inventory and appraisal. Okay, let me look at order. Let me look, I'm looking at certain things when that's the court's answer. Charges and credits. I do not do mine like this. I actually list separately and I don't have my sample up, so I apologize, but I do list them out separately. Maybe let me just show you. Well, it will take too much time for me to get it. So again, I'm sorry, I'll come back here and I list them out. What I do, let me just show you, is I take the inventory and appraisal page, and I'm sorry, the GC 400 page. I kind of repeat all these items. So I'll say my cash on hand was this at the beginning of the period. Then I say my receipts were this, my gains were this, my total charges were this. Then I have a second column for credits, and I'll say my disbursements were this, my losses were this, my ending assets were this, and this total. So I make sure on my petition, this total and this total are showing. So that's how I do it different in this column. My authorized investments, I always want to state that they have been in interest-bearing accounts. If there are any times I'm doing an accounting and I see that they are not in interest-bearing accounts, it depends. If I'm producing this for a pro per, I somewhat will refer them back to a probate code or a conservatorship manual, which states what needs to be done. If it's a law firm, I will tell them, hey, you may want to quickly tell your conservator that I don't see this being in interest-bearing accounts, and the courts look at it. I will tell you, the courts are pretty funny. They look at it more if there are more than one beneficiary, but if there's only going to be one beneficiary, they're not as picky about it, and you can imagine why. Please note that if accounts are not interest-bearing accounts, and I have seen this in a court case where a beneficiary has sued the conservator or the administrator for not keeping the money in an interest-bearing account, and that administrator or conservator was personally liable for replacing what interest was lost by not keeping funds in an interest-bearing account. So careful on that one. Statement of liabilities. If there are any liabilities, this is not common that this is kept, especially for probates. It depends if you're carrying a house. Sometimes I don't know, and sometimes the other person doesn't know the total amount of the loan that's outstanding or things like that. But it's pretty much more to answer and make sure there are no judgments against there are that you know of no Medicare, Medi-Cal chargebacks, things of that nature. But not a lot of times you know that in preparing an accounting. Okay, this is optional. Now, this is one of the categories that are optional. I've sent this in past classes, and then people turn in accountings where they find this optional, they don't put it in, they don't put in this one, they don't put in many other ones because they just didn't think it was necessary. Every other category is necessary except for when I say it's optional. Because in your instance, you may not have sold an automobile. So if you didn't during the account period, there's no purpose for selling this. Or I'm sorry, stating this. So you may just skip these two items right here and go to the next one and renumber. Your number 7 could be what I'm calling in my sample number 9 or 10. Okay, so in this case, this person sold an automobile. A lot of times in our example, it states it was on inventory and appraisal, attachment 2. Remember, attachment 2 means non-cash, and the value was given by the probate referee. So in this case, it stated there was a loss on the sale. It was shown in Schedule D, and you just request the current court to confirm this depreciating asset. I don't put these in technically, not for automobiles, but other things possibly. Sale of furniture. Again, this person sold furniture that was on the inventory and appraisal. They specifically state it was in the vacation or conservatee's home or the vacation rental or something like that. They may not sell it. They may discard it because it's not worth something. I would possibly put that in. Things like that you would want to note. Or if you didn't have this, you would skip it. Sale of real property. They sold the vacation home. There was a gain. Schedule B shows the gain. The order of this court confirmed the sale. In this case, that tells me, well, it's a conservatorship. So conservatorships, you always must get court approval before selling the real property, and it is a court confirmation sale. In probates and other cases where it's not a court confirmation sale, I will also list a notice of proposed action was issued on this date and provided that distribution would take place on this date. So the sale occurred after, something of that nature, just to tell the court that you did comply, you issued a notice of proposed action, there were no objections that you received, and so you did the proper thing to sell the property. Any questions? I'm already up to 9. I think I'm halfway through. Any questions so far? Okie dokie. Going down to additional bond, I typically don't write additional bond. I will just say bond. I will state that the bond, let's say the bond was 20,000 minimum bond. This was the point where I was saying back where you marked the inventory and appraisal sufficient or non-sufficient. Typically, I'll state here, yes, now that I sold a house, I have a lot more cash and the bond is insufficient. If it's a probate, because it's distribution immediately after this petition, I don't ask for a bond to be increased. If it's a conservatorship, typically the court may or may not ask for an increase in bond. If it's a pro per and I'm concerned that possibly the court may ask for additional bond, I may ask the court instead to place funds in a blocked account so the bond is not increased, because then an attorney has to be involved in the case. So there are other things you can do with this bond section, but in this case, the conservator took it upon themselves to go tell their bond company they want to increase their bond from $1 amount to another so that it now covers all the cash that they have available, and they state here that now the bond is sufficient. I don't ever see this happen. No one ever purchases additional bonds, but it's in the example, so I'm going to give it. Typically, this only happens when the court says they require you to increase the bond. Going down, number 11. So again, I'm sorry, I have to go back. Bond must be stated. It's not an optional category. It should be in the petition. No affiliate relationships must be in the petition. It's very important that you state if the conservator hired a family member. Quite a few instances I have where I do include this. Say, for instance, in a probate, I had the administrator sell the real property. His wife was the sales agent and ended up also being the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. There's nothing wrong with that as long as the agent wasn't paid any different amount, and as long as you really don't show that there was a huge loss on the sale because of the fact that maybe your wife sold it to a friend or something of that nature. You just have to be careful about that. The other thing you have to be careful about is, typically I use this example, conservatorship. Say, for instance, it's a conservatorship and the conservator, there's HOA where the conservatee has a home. HOA means, landscaping has to be done. Landscaper notifies me he's going on vacation for a month, or I know they're dealing with it quite often now down south where it's very unfortunate, but landscapers who do that type of work are, let's say, a little bit scared to do any landscaping work now because of ice agents and things that are happening. So if that's the case, you still have to maintain the landscaping. So I use the example, say my son comes home from college for the summer, and I say, hey, son, I really need somebody to go mow this lawn. Typically, I pay the landscaper $50 every time he goes, but in this case, because you're doing me a favor, I'm going to pay you $75 because I know you need books for college. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Major trouble there. I can pay my son the same rate, or it should be a little bit lower than what a professional landscaper does or a regular landscaper does, because they have skills that my son does not have being a college student, even if maybe he mows my lawn or our lawn at the house. That doesn't make him like a professional. So be very careful when you do things like that. but as long as you're paying them the rate of or less than somebody else you would be paying, you're okay. But you must state, yes, I did pay my son to do landscaping for 1 month during the time that the landscaper was on vacation or unavailable or something like that. Please make sure you state all that information in there. Or if somebody helped clean out the house, like I've had instances where somebody tells me, well, we had to clean out the house to get it ready for sale. I had my daughter help me and I paid her a certain fee. Be careful that the amount you pay is not above what you would pay somebody else that was not your child or family member to help. Okay, now we're getting down to conservators' compensation. Again, I've seen these go both ways. Sometimes conservators waive, sometimes they do want a fee. It's completely optional, but regardless, this needs to be stated. So in my example, I state how much time the conservator has spent assisting the conservatee. What is the relationship between the conservatee and the conservator? Because sometimes if it's a family member or somebody you're close to, you just want to state that. In this case, they stated they visited the care facility to make sure she was clean, she had all, she was receiving proper care, all her personal needs were met, scheduled and attended doctor appointments. I just put in things like that. And what they did, the conservator marshaled all the assets, paid the bills promptly, managed the estate frugally. Typically, that means there were no expenses that were questionable, or I feel they were questionable. Again, if I'm doing this for a pro per, I must state, even if I feel something is questionable, I cannot present that question or my concerns to the person I'm preparing the accounting for. If I'm preparing an accounting for an attorney, yes, I go back to that attorney or paralegal, whoever I'm kind of working with, and I will say, hey, I just want to bring to your attention, this looks like it could be questioned by the court, or that you may need to explain it later or in further details. And it kind of gives the attorney, oh my. Yes, I've had attorneys say, oh my. Or, oh geez, what am I going to do? I've got to, because ultimately in that case, the attorney is the responsible party, right? So they've got to figure out how to keep that under wrap, explain it, get more details, correct it, do something at that point, right? So again, depending on who you're preparing the accounting for. If you're a paralegal doing this accounting, again, it's really important. You may want to stop and say, hey, to talk to your attorney and say, hey, I noticed this. This might be a problem for us, etc. But make sure no money goes missing, because believe it or not, I love to hear every single, so many times I do accounting. Oh, I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what happened. Well, okay, where did it go? Oh, I don't know. I didn't get the mail that day, or oh, somebody else was living at the house and now I can't find that asset, or it looks like it was taken by maybe a beneficiary who visited the home or something. It gets crazy sometimes, but make sure you note all that. Okay, continuing on, they arranged for the sale of the automobile. They arranged for the sale of the vacation home, things of that nature. In this instance, the conservator is only requesting a fee. This is not reimbursement of costs, only a fee of $500. Typically, I like to keep, so when the conservator has time, I like to make sure that the fee they're given typically does not go above 50 an hour. Contra Costa Superior Court, within their local court rules, do provide that a non-professional fiduciary can go up to, in fees, 75 an hour. A professional fiduciary, if I recall, is like 150 or 175. But down South LA, they like to keep it below, or 50 or below. Deep, and it's really dependent on how big of an estate you have. If you have a conservatorship estate that's only $50,000 and your time times $50 an hour is close to the 50,000, trust me, the court is not going to allow those fees, because they're not going to allow you to liquidate all of the conservatees funds. So keep that in mind. But that's the compensation. Now, if at the end, here, if the conservator waives fees, which is often done, I will put conservator waives fees, and I'll repeat it down below in the prayer. So this can change quite a bit based on your circumstance. Any questions? Because that was a pretty big topic there. Any questions on the conservator compensation? Okay. I'm going to move down to attorney compensation. Again, this is conservatorship only. With probate, it's a statutory compensation, so it has different guidelines on what do you consider the statutory. In a conservatorship or a guardianship, attorney can ask, or does ask for attorney fees. I will tell you, in a conservatorship, if an attorney is asking for attorney fees, there also has to be a declaration. Sorry, Clarice, I'm gonna mute you. The attorney has to complete a declaration, so be mindful of that. But in this case, we're stating that the person did hire an attorney, and what he did during the case, we're stating no payments have been made. If you did receive payments and it is in your trust account and you are the attorney, $5,000 payment has been made. The money was placed into the attorney's trust account, and upon approval of the fees, attorney will move the monies from trust to operating accounts, something of that nature. I like to write in. You use your own words, but again, based on Exhibit A, which is a timesheet of the attorney. Let me say, in Northern California, again, if you're an attorney preparing your fees, what happens is some courts request them in categories, specific categories, and you would need to look what those categories are up and make sure your invoice follows those categories. When I'm talking down south attorneys, they're not so finicky about the categories, but they will ask for your complete invoice and make sure that your fee is reasonable. So keep that in mind. You must always state whether veteran benefits were received. 9 times out of 10, they are not. But if they were, you must state that. I also like to state, if, say, for instance, the home, if I know this, was under a VA loan, I like to state that also in this section. Whether the court does anything about that or not, is up to them. I like to put everything I can and be upfront and honest so there are no questions. You must also state if they were or are in a state hospital. This makes a difference. Especially I like to state if you know they're in a state hospital or if Medicare, Medi-Cal, something like that is paying. But most important is to state whether they are in a state hospital. I've not done one that they were in a state hospital, so it's going to be odd to me when I see one that, yes, they are. But no, none of mine have been. Conservatee's address, typically, depending on things, I don't know that I like to state this again. You should be able to state, but it's public record. If I have an empty house or something like that, I'm a little bit cautious of kind of putting it out there that it's empty. But typically, I may say the name of the hospital, the contact phone number, who is the person at the facility that the court, if they wish to ask, can contact, something like that. And other times, I may state the address. Sometimes if they're at their own residence, I will just say they're located at their personal residence and I won't repeat an address, only because I'm trying to make sure I keep the conservatee safe a little bit. So I will state that. Account statements, you must submit account statements. Again, this is difficult. If you're submitting, okay, Northern California, I know I keep referring to the different courts, but I don't know where you guys are all located. Northern California courts typically want all bank statements for the entire account period. All, meaning beginning to end. You could have, there's times I have 10 bank accounts. They want them for all. They must be submitted submitted separately. They do not ever get attached to the petition. They are submitted confidentially. I will show you that within the sample, I create a separate cover page that states these are the original bank statements for my first account. I will state original bank statements. I myself like to add Morgan Stanley account 1234 from this date to this date. So I list on the cover page what I'm submitting behind. But keep in mind, once you submit bank statements behind this cover page and separately than your petition, these bank statements are confidential, meaning neither the attorney, paralegals, anybody who can log on to the court's website cannot obtain them from a court website. And if they go to the court themselves to try and obtain them, you better be the attorney or somebody somebody who has been given permission to look at these bank statements. So it really protects just the average person or a beneficiary from going and obtaining bank statements because they're considered confidential. So do not ever submit them. I've seen it happen where they're submitted with a petition and the court jumped all over the attorney for doing that. Because this is public information, the statements are private or confidential. So down south, keep in mind, they only really care to see the beginning and the end statement. They just want to verify that you have the proper amounts listed at the beginning and the proper amounts listed at the end. When you get down south into your second, third, or fourth accountings, they only ask for the ending statement. They've already seen the beginning through your prior accountings. They have that record. They only want to see your ending bank statements. So again, depending on what court you're in, could be a difference in what you're submitting. on the bank statements. Any questions there? I'm almost going down to the end. So any questions there? Y'all are super quiet today. Capital changes. Basically, capital changes have, I use this mostly when I'm talking about sales or sales of stock or count transfers. Again, remember when I stated when I have, say, a stock portfolio account that's listed under the probate, the decedent's name specifically, and it gets transferred to a estate account, I will list that here. On this specific date, the administrator transferred all mutual funds or stock accounts or whatever you want to call them from Morgan Stanley account 1234 to Morgan Stanley account 4567, which created an estate account, and there might be a difference in what the value of the stock is. So it was originally bought at $1. When I did my transfer, guess what? I had to buy it at $3 or something like that. I state that in there. Otherwise, you just state there have been no capital changes. That's mostly how I state it. Okay, statement of liabilities. Again, like if there is a liability, most of the time I don't know this, so I don't use it often. Request for special notice. Since y'all are a law firm, you know specifically what this is. You must state whether or not somebody has filed a request for special notice. So in this sample, no requests for special notices have been filed. A lot of times I will indicate 2 requests for special notices have been filed by, let's say, California, State of California, Franchise Tax Board, P.O. Box, blah, 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 MSA, whatever their number is, and list their full address. Sometimes it could be the probate referee if they haven't been paid yet. The probate referee filed a request for special notice. I'll list their name and their full address because that will be part of the notice. A lot of times, let me also say what you may watch out for is if somebody files a request for special notice and later withdraws it, I will still put that they filed a request for special notice. In parentheses next to their name, I will put withdrawn and the specific date they withdrew their request, just so the court doesn't have to go back and look, or everything is stated there for them. They can go back and verify, but they don't have to look for it. So that's what I indicate in mine. And this is so different because I also indicate in my petitions who's required to be served notice. So I will say parties to receive notice, and I will list out every beneficiary, potential beneficiary that I feel should be noticed. Again, I am an LDA and not an attorney, so it is not my job to determine who should be noticed. I would just only be able to ask the pro per at that point who is entitled to notice, and whoever they give me, I put in. Again, when I'm preparing these for an attorney's, I know their whole case, so I I'm able to know who I'm supposed to put in there. Now we're getting down to the prayer. So basically you told the court everything that's in your accounting. Now what are you asking for? So here is what the conservator is praying for. Again, this has to be a little bit different between Northern California and Southern California. And it's line 2. So this accountant report be approved and settled. Southern California require you to state the account period. The account period from March 8th through blah, 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 be approved. All acts and accounts. So you must state the account period in there. That the sale of the automobile, remember, whatever you request up in the details, and again, we're talking here, whatever you're requesting up here must also be noted in the prayer. So they asked for a approval of the sale, approval of the furniture. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to go back a tiny bit. I skipped something because it's not in here, and I apologize, but it's important. So after your conservator compensation and your attorney compensation, I myself always add in, because typically that's how it happens, either the conservator or the attorney and or both will request reimbursement of advanced expenses. So I will have a category called attorney expense reimbursement or conservator expense reimbursement. And if it's the conservator, of course, it has to be in some type of spreadsheet or some type of invoice that shows date, what the expense was for, and the amount paid that they want to be reimbursed. So I will state down here, conservator prior to locating or obtaining access to bank account paid these expenses and wants to be reimbursed, and what the total amount of that is. And or same thing for the attorney. If it's the attorney, I use all the filing fees. If they paid for letters, certification of letters, your one legal fees, anything of that nature. If you had to order a death certificate, any fees like that would be stated. So the attorney expense reimbursement. So I forgot that. I apologize. So down here, when we get in the prayer, because the conservator only asked for $500, I don't use this exact wording, but the wording is to that the conservator is allowed to pay themselves this $500. The conservator is allowed now to pay the attorney his fee. If the attorney already has the money in the trust accounts, I would say the attorney has permission to release the funds from trust or something of that nature. My next item would be if I ask for reimbursement of conservator expenses, I would add a conservator is allowed to be reimbursed $500 for expenses paid on behalf of the conservatorship or something of that nature, and use the same wording for the attorney. And then I always add this last statement. Until recently, I've never seen a court change this statement on me. But believe it or not, San Francisco, I just got one back. And San Francisco, the judge there, which to me, I find San Francisco courts much more difficult than others, but you know, they do their ways. But the court added in a different time period. Like for instance, on a conservatorship, you file the first 2 years after appointment, and then I'm sorry, the first year after appointment, and then it's 2 years after the fact. If the court feels that there was something that your accounting looked, let's say, just not 100% up to par, they could state that your next accounting is due within a year instead of the 2 years. They could state here, let's see other examples. that they want stuff moved to a blocked account, they can order whatever they want. I've just never seen a judge cross this out and issue orders. But in San Francisco recently, I had a judge cross this out and issue three other orders. Sometimes those orders might be below their name. Then they'll cross out all of this, well, on an order they'll cross out all of this and sign their name after their issues. So that's on the order. But going back to we're only on the petition, this needs to be in here. You will date it. I don't do mine this way. What I do is the attorney, it signs right here as the attorney for, I put the David Lowry, comma, conservator. And then the only time I have the conservator themselves sign is a verification. Please note that every petition must have the verification. The verification states under penalty of perjury. I always use this exact wording. No, I lied. I always use similar wording. So instead, where it says I'm the conservator of the account lists the reports and stuff. I don't do that. I state I have knowledge of and I repeat the entire, oops, I'm so sorry, I went too fast. Caption here. And then I have them verify that it's true and correct under penalty of perjury. They date it and they sign it. And then after this, I put the exhibit, whatever exhibit. I notice in the sample of the accounting, it doesn't say that your accounting is going to be within an exhibit. You need to add to that. So I will say attached here to as exhibit A, or a true and correct copy of the account is attached here to as Exhibit A. My expense reports, if my conservator is asking for reimbursement of expenses, might be Exhibit B, or my attorney expense reimbursement might be Exhibit C. So after the verification, I'll start running blank exhibit pages so that my attachments can follow behind. And then you must always note that you must do an order. The order, again, I know this is going to sound funny. Northern California requests an order before the hearing. So it's basically called a proposed order. Down south or down LA, Riverside, San Diego, Los Angeles, Orange County, they request you cannot turn in an order until after the hearing and you get the minute order from the judge. So the judge will, or the clerk actually, will issue a minute order. Once you get the minute order, then you can prepare the official order. You won't call it a proposed order. It's really just the order. And then you turn it in and the court will take a couple of days to have the judge sign it and return it to you. I will tell you, if your order does not state exactly what the minute order of the court for down south, you'll never get your order approved. That's one of the daunting things. Whereas in Contra Costa and other Northern California counties, I see in proposed orders that were submitted, if the judge doesn't like your exact wording you used in that order, or wants to change something, they'll cross it out and initial it. You don't see that down south. You better turn in your order exactly what the minute order says, or you're not getting it signed. Sometimes you could try 4 and 5 times, and you want to give up because you can't figure out why it won't be why it's being rejected. So those are things that do happen. Now we are at the end. That is it. I only went 4 minutes over. That's awesome because sometimes they can go till 1 o'clock. So I want to make sure now, are there any questions? We went over the inventory and appraisal. We went over how to prepare an accounting. We went over what the petition would be. And and I'm sorry, legal dogs to gmail.com. That is my contact email. Again, don't be shy. This is your time. If you have any questions, if you want any clarity, I'm here. I can answer you right now. If there's something that you saw that was different than what you're used to, go ahead and ask. Any questions whatsoever?
Hi, I don't have a question on the material specifically. I have to log off, but I remember at the beginning you guys stated you were providing some materials. How are we receiving those?
You would have received the materials before we logged on a couple of days ago with the link to
Okay.
the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
That's where all the materials are, hun.
Okay. I just wanted to double check.
Let me know and send an email if you didn't get them, and I'll send them to you,
No, I
PDF.
do see them. Thank you so much for
Okay,
that.
great. Any other questions? Jeff, well, let me ask attorneys or paralegals. I just what you saw, how do you feel this class? Do you feel that it gave you some information you were looking for? Again, this isn't a teaching class for attorneys or paralegals, but do you feel the material was helpful even for a pro per, or would you make any suggestions, keeping in mind pro pers usually have such limited information on how to do these inventory and appraisals, petitions, accountings? Everybody's being shy today. Nobody has comments? Nobody has helpful? Thank you, Gwendolyn. Jeff, no comments from you? You seem to be the only one that's talking most of the time. He might have logged off. Wow. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for attending. We give these class approximately every 2 months. You can take them as much as you wish, as many times as you wish. The data is typically very much the same every class, so it's not like you'll learn a whole lot more, but sometimes the data is different. Again, go on to Contra Costa Superior Court Law Library. They will have a schedule for you. It will also be in the materials. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead. I don't know if Rex is still on, but Rex, you can say goodbye and release, stop the recording and stop the class. Okay, he's not there, so I'm going to see how I can end. I'm going to end the meeting for all. Thank you guys. Take care.